What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some first impressions for Slug Tactics, a roguelite TRPG utilizing, of course, the Slug franchise. Now, this game is out today, and I'm able to bring you this first impressions video because they sent over a review copy my way, as I cover a ton of these games. And to that end, I will be giving this one a full review, but frankly, I haven't quite been able to finish it yet because there's a little more game here than I thought, and they only provided me that review copy a couple of days ago, so I just haven't had the time to actually get through all of it 100%, and thus I'm only about halfway. But let's talk a little bit about the game itself. So Slug Tactics is set in the Slug universe or franchise, and I have to confess some ignorance here. It is my understanding that Slug was a big arcade series back when, arcades were a thing, and then also a series of side-scrollers during like the PS2 era as well. There might be more to it than that I am just, again, simply ignorant of, because I am otherwise relatively unfamiliar with the franchise, which means I'm sure that all of the returning characters and everything are a bit inconsequential to someone like myself, but it is my understanding that there is a lot of that in this game for people who are much more familiar with it than I am. But as to the quality of that, the people more familiar with the franchise will simply have to chime in down below for us. Now, what I am very familiar with, though, are tactics games, and in that regard, I would say this particular game is a pretty snappy and fun system with a few limitations, mostly just the fact that the game itself is relatively limited. In scope, I would say there are 4 major areas which we'll get to, a limited amount of mission types, and perhaps unsurprisingly, given its roguelike nature, a whole lot of repeating content. But even in the vein of a game like this, I do think it's a little on the, again, limited side. But what it does, it seems to do very, very well. Now, you start the game in control of 3 characters, Marco, Fio, and Eri, and over the course of several attempts and runs, you'll unlock up to 6 more characters, bringing the total up to 9. Now, we're going to be utilizing all of these characters as we unlock them in an attempt to take down General Morden, who has taken over Sirocco City with his rebel army. Our job, simply, is to go around completing tactics turn-based missions in up to 4 different zones before taking the fight to General Morden himself in order to finish the run. Now, once you actually clear that for the first time, you'll then unlock optional bosses and stuff and little secrets to find as well, and it's my understanding there's a true ending, but other than that, the story is relatively tame, as it tends to be with these kinds of games, as they're more of a vehicle for the combat than anything else. So let's talk about the actual gameplay here. Now, as a turn-based roguelite, the game effectively consists of various runs. Each one of these runs will be up to 2 different zones in the 4 available, consisting of about 3 missions each and a boss fight, utilizing 3 of our potentially 9 characters. Now, in these battles, we'll be able to perform a bunch of different feats, pretty much all of which are actually achievements, and these contribute to both story moments for all of these characters. That is to say, completing those achievements will then unlock a story moment that you'll get some background and context on, which I believe is probably going to have something to do with the true ending. And it also, of course, challenges to utilize each character's skill set. But then outside of that, in order to unlock the actual characters, you typically just have to either complete a set amount of runs with different characters or complete a run across the game's 4 different zones. Now, you have to complete a minimum of 2 of them, but it is possible to complete all 4 or, simply just 3 to give each run a bit of a variable length. Now, let's talk about the missions. As I mentioned, each zone consists basically of 3 missions before a boss fight occurs and you're forced into it. Now, each of these missions will have a primary reward and a secondary reward based on whether or not you complete the mission at all, and then, of course, whether or not you completed a secondary objective. These rewards are what you would expect in a roguelite: money to spend on shops and things in between each individual zone, upgrades, perks, and mods that stick with you for the sake of the run but not permanently, additions to your revive counter, or even just ammo to reload our special weapons. Now, once we get into the missions, there's a handful of types, but generally it's kill everyone, kill designated targets, guide someone to the end of the map, simply make your way across the map, destroy a convoy, or simply last a number of turns. Those are, I would say, the primary mission types. Now, each zone gives you a different environment, interactables, and enemies to face off against. I will say that my least favorite so far has been the Tombs zone, or like the sandy Egyptian desert type place, because these guys utilize mummies and they are very, very annoying. But one thing I've really liked about combat itself so far is just how variable it is with each of the 9 characters and how you've combined them. And this is because each character's playstyle is pretty different. Now, as you complete runs, you'll earn credits to spend outside of those runs in like the lobby area to spend on upgrades and starting loadouts to start each run with for each character, so there's a little bit of variance even here. But basically, each character has a general playstyle based on the skills and things that they'll be able to pick up. And because of that, and the fact that you can only bring 3 with you at a time, you can sort of mix and match and come up with fun approaches for things. But there are, of course, a few generalities worth knowing. First of all, combat is more about running and gunning than anything else. In fact, most of your defense comes from movement, which I thought was kind of novel. Basically, the farther your character moves, with seemingly only their base movement, I might add, they'll pick up dodge. Dodge will reduce incoming damage on the enemy's turn in addition to applying more if you manage to find cover. And outside of killing enemies so they can't hit you, that is the primary form of damage mitigation from the very high amount of enemies you'll be facing off against. And that means, despite the turn-based nature of it, the combat itself stays fairly active, I would say. Another thing to note, though, is the synchronization attacks. Basically every single character, no matter who they are, if they are in range of an enemy that is attacked by another one of your characters, they will make an attack with their primary weapon to add on to the damage you've already done. And this can be especially devastating if you set up and plan for it, which is what one of the characters, the last one you unlock, Leona's kind of kit, is all about, really, because she will, after she kills an enemy, throw up an after image, like a little mirror image of herself that can't attack but can be attacked. Except what those images will do is perform synchronization attacks against anything as appropriate, which is a really fun mechanic to mess around with. But each character's got something like that. Now, one of the potential rewards from missions is also assets. Assets are big buffs that you can drop in combat to either, give yourself extra turns, or, much more fun, drop down like tanks or mechs to hop into in order to deal maximum damage to the enemy. As vehicles, if you can find one to hop in, are able to use all of their attacks in a single turn as opposed to, only one or your primary or secondary weapon, basically. But the problem here is that these vehicles run off of fuel, and both movement as well as activating your weapons spins that fuel, so you can really only use them for a few turns. But they are so devastating, that's usually not too much of a limiting factor. And so far, using some of those more universal mechanics on top of figuring out what works for each character and their playstyle has been a lot of fun. But as I mentioned, that does butt up against the fact that it's just seemingly a pretty limited in scope game. I'm already seeing duplicate missions and stuff. And then there's the occasional minor technical problem. Sometimes from the things you might have seen on screen here, there's an elevation level to the various levels you'll be fighting on. And while normally if you mouse over where the elevation would change, you'll get an option to scroll to the part of it that you cannot physically see because you can't turn the camera. But sometimes that just doesn't seem to work. Some of the key bindings are not, able to be rebound at the moment, though you can mostly play this one with a mouse, so that's really, again, not a big deal. And then sometimes the game's turn reset feature does not always work, so while it is still your turn, if you don't like how something played out, you can either undo a character's movement, or twice per turn you can just completely reset the turn and try again. And every once in a while that turn reset seems to bug out some of the enemies. Bosses in particular seem to be prone to this. Some of the end bosses for each area are these large machines, and a couple of them move around. The ones that move around, sometimes upon a turn reset, will show that they are in one place only to see your attack previews not actually work. And I realized what was happening here is that the game thinks this enemy is actually somewhere else other than where it is physically up on the battlefield, which I would say is the most annoying thing I ran into by far. But first impressions wise, this seems like a really fun tactics title, and I'm going to enjoy leaning into it and seeing exactly what each of these characters is capable of and trying to find out the little secrets and stuff. But as for right now, the game should be launching today at, I believe, $25 US, and thus far as I move to review this one, that doesn't seem to be so bad of a deal. But of course, I'll actually give my full thoughts when I am done reviewing this one. In the meantime, I would say that's pretty much going to do it for today. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the full review in a few days, certainly subscribe and stick around. But in the meantime, definitely let me know how you feel about this one down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz has. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.